Yeah, Schindler's List, 1993, Steven Spielberg. You could be forgiven for just saying, casually, yeah, he's the best director. It's
Did you hear who some of the other options were? The job of acting this film would have been pretty difficult.
There's two moments in the film that really I've seen that. I've seen that exact thing. It's exactly comparable.
There's people in our culture that put in this environment would do those sorts of things, but that environment's not there yet.
Talking to me?
Well, hello, and welcome to the Video Lineup Podcast. My name is Thomas. This is Nicholas. We are working our way through the AFI Top 100 Films of All Time, and occasionally we haven't yet gone off the beaten path. And
we keep talking about tangents.
Yeah, we haven't.
Never happened yet.
We haven't been on many tangents yet. This week we are up at episode 8. 8? Gosh,
I thought it was 8.
It's Schindler's List is what it is. And we have to double check.
Actually, I thought it was 9. I did a video saying it was 9.
Oh my gosh.
I could be wrong.
It'll have been on screen by now, so you'll know what episode it is. So this week, Schindler's List, 1993, Steven Spielberg, black and white, Liam Neeson as Oscar Schindler.
It didn't look black and white, like it looks sepia, or was that?
Well, we're getting into details already. People don't even know. People think it's a comedy or a musical at this point. Mostly, I thought it was black and white. Did you watch a sepia version or something?
Well, I thought I saw some sort of brown tinges to it.
Yeah, well, it opens in colour, and it's all sort of like that old sort of Godfather 2 sort of.
Sorry, I've ruined the intro.
No. It's all right. I'm trying to blaze through so anyone who's listening and can engage quickly. World War II. This is a very heavy movie. Obviously, I have purposely avoided watching this film for 30 years because it's 30 years this year.
Yeah. Is it because of what people have said about
No,
it?
I saw a sequence that occurs in the film where the one-armed, the older Jewish man who's got one arm and is super grateful for the job.
Yeah.
And he's thanking Oscar Schindler, and then they stop them all to just do random stuff because that's what they were doing. And he's digging, and then these soldiers laugh at him and take him off to the side and just shoot him. Yeah. Just because he's got one arm. Yeah. And I just couldn't handle it. I was like, I just couldn't believe that people did that sort of thing to each other. So I'm 37, so I wouldn't have been 7 years old. I would have been probably like 13, I think. And I was just blown away by the reality because I knew it was based on a true story.
You stuck with Jurassic Park or something, which
switched
was
over to the other.
Same.
Yeah, I was going to say I switched over to the other Spielberg movie, and I did actually because I definitely had seen that a few times. Yeah. But this one focuses solely on what's happening in Poland. In
it's based
Krakow.
off a book, wasn't it?
Yeah, well, it was based off this book by an Australian author.
Yeah, Thomas
Keneally.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and it's all about this German industrialist who is an opportunist and a schmoozer and a really, was at one point in jail for bribery of Nazi officials to get government war contracts, and he eventually, like the long and the short of it is the list is 1,200, 1,400 Jews that he manages to purchase to have him work in their munitions factory for the World War II, and the war ends and he manages to save their lives by doing so. So
it's sort of his journey into sort of
the movie functions. It feels. I watched it last night, and it feels like it's his journey. You see a lot of his first. I'm going to cough. I need another sip of my beverage.
Water.
You can take over if I'm getting a tickle in my throat. Might be starting to cry. It functions as his perspective with all of these other little, I don't want to say like vignettes, like little sequences, little moments of the horrors of the war. You have a really big 15, 20-minute sequence of, is it, it's the Night of Shattered Glass. I remembered what it was called. They gave it a name. Basically when the Nazis went into the Jewish ghettos and
That was an interesting scene, which maybe we can get into later. The way it was filmed and the music that was going on behind it was.
yeah. It was the whole movie's up front. It is an absolute. It's Steven Spielberg, so it's like a
not
cliche.
his usual type of film.
Well, not what he had been probably known for, maybe. Up to that point, I think he'd made The Color Purple, which I haven't seen. I don't think it's on the list.
Yeah,
Maybe we should do a little aside. Another one of our suggested asides. Hopefully, you do.
Was it fairly early in his career? This film,
1993. Well, it was 75 as Jaws, so it's not 20 years into his career.
I'm exposing myself.
That's okay. Well, it's he's an older man now, so So what I was getting at is that it's Steven Spielberg, so you could be forgiven for just saying, casually, yeah, he's the best director. It's sort of like cliche a bit.
Did you hear who some of the other options were?
Yeah, that was Scorsese and Billy Wilder and
Polanski as well.
Roman Polanski. Have you seen The Pianist?
I think I have, but again, the same with Schindler's List. I'm pretty sure I've watched it, but a long time ago.
Yeah, so. That's the one Adrian Brody won the Oscar for, the equal youngest actor to win Oscar.
This is where we should be doing a tangent and maybe watching.
Well, I just wanted to spit out this part about Spielberg is that I feel like it sounds like I'm just throwing this away, but I really do think this is one of the greatest films of all time. I'm gonna say I genuinely think it is the most powerful use of cinema that I've ever seen in my life.
Yeah.
Like it's I'm not saying it means that everyone needs to watch it. I do think at one point everyone should watch it.
Yeah.
But I do think it's just really powerful piece of cinema. Piece of cinema sounds really tossy, but it's just it's just all of the elements come together to powerfully impact the viewer. It is gut-wrenching, and also at moments, little moments funny.
Which I think
touching.
that's where I think he was the perfect director for it. Like if it was heavy the whole time, I don't think people could handle it. It's like you'd become desensitized or something. Whereas those little moments of comedic relief. Sort of.
Yeah, it's not like belly laugh thing, but it's just it is little human moments. Well, what did you think of the movie? Like generally,
I totally agree with you. That I'd even put it higher on the list.
Like,
I thought the film was amazing. I think the choices made to film it in black and white was right. The music was amazing all throughout. The actors, extraordinary. Like I think they were looking at Mel Gibson as the role for.
I think that he
Oscar,
campaigned.
Which I don't think.
There's a few actors that wanted to do it, and I heard that he campaigned a little bit for it, but I don't know how much.
I don't think
Kevin Costner said he'd do it for free.
Yeah.
So there's
I think Liam Neeson was the perfect character, like a big, strong, attractive, dominating man, which Oscar seemed to be.
Yeah.
And those sort of chiseled features, he looked like he fit in that setting, whereas I don't think Mel Gibson.
Yeah, well, another actor that they Steven Spielberg approached for it was Harrison Ford, and Harrison Ford, like wisely declined on the basis of that he felt like the story needed to be at the forefront, and that it would be distracting. Which is going to lead into a thought that it'd be distracting that they have this person who was known for Indiana Jones and Han Solo to be there. But also, it's an interesting piece of trivia that I learned. Harrison Ford's Jewish.
Yeah.
He said a non-Jewish actor should play the part. I mean, I don't know. I always thought if your mum is Jewish, then that makes you ethnically Jewish or whatever it would be, whether you're practicing or not.
Okay.
And it doesn't come through the dad. It's a matriarchal thing. And his mum's Jewish. So, and Liam Neeson not being Jewish, playing a non-Jewish character, it's important. And look, we all know Liam Neeson now from like I have a particular set of skills, and he's phenomenal in those movies. I love him, and he's great in a movie. I was at JB Hi-Fi buying Blu-rays today, and it came up. I'll remember it. It's Cold Pursuit. That's a really good movie. It's a remake of a Swedish movie, I think.
Okay.
Anyway, he's fantastic across the board, but this is relatively unknown Liam Neeson.
Yeah, I think they wanted to find some actors that weren't as well known so that you can just watch it and not be distracted.
And they're perfect.
Yeah.
They're all perfect, aren't they?
Yeah, I think the job of acting this film would have been pretty difficult, I imagine, at certain times. I did listen to an interview of one lady, I can't remember her name, but she was, I think, the servant of Ammon.
Helen was the person's name. Because I shouldn't say characters, because they're real people.
Yeah.
We'll say characters for the Nazis, and we'll say people for the Jews.
And she's just talking about the weird energy on set, like you're trying to, have fun, keep it light at times, but then there's this heavy sort of cloud that was over everyone because a lot of the actors had family that were caught up in the Holocaust.
The movie, honestly, it is such a public service that it exists, and like we'll get to it later, but there is definitely people in this world, and obviously learning about how the movie was released, that just hate the Jews. They just hate them, and the idea that there's a movie that even acknowledges that anything evil happened to them in the past is just not okay. And some Muslim countries, I don't say all Muslim countries, but some Muslim countries banned it, citing the nudity in it and the sexuality or the sex or whatever, of which there's like fleeting moments, of sex
all
scenes.
Of that, I think, was appropriate for.
I got to say, as a person who does not appreciate gratuitous sex in movies for its distracting and unnecessary nature, everything in this movie has to be in it.
Yeah,
from every woman that's laying with it, naked, and the sheets of the Nazi officers thing, all the way through. None of it felt gratuitous.
Yeah,
it all added to the sort of just like. Everything just added. It all worked.
And I think being shot in black and white or sepia,
depending.
It was a way of telling this story, and I felt like I could allow it to wash over me and not like it's shocking, but you can watch it and you're able to tolerate it in a way. Because I think the idea is to kind of educate but tell a story and talk about a topic that's difficult, but you're almost being taught without realizing it as well, because you get caught up in the story that's.
Well, if we go back to last week's episode with On the Waterfront, how I really didn't enjoy that movie, and maybe upon reflection it's slowly warming up. But that was a movie from the 50s, all shot on black and white, intentionally choosing to be shot on gritty, grainy black and white for a newsreel kind of effect. That had a kind of own impact of its own for choosing to go that way.
Yeah.
This movie, choosing to go on black and white, exactly like what you said. Sometimes I think films, they think, like, oh, atrocity, this is artistic. We're going to show you the whole thing and hold the camera and force you to see it all. And then we're going to call it creativity, and we're going to call it artistic vision and all those sorts of things. And I'm not saying it's never that, but it does feel like at a certain point, it's what it is a lack of choices. Because possibly what you could do is a story could play out. You could put a camera in every possible location, film every act, and then just chop out all of the most engaging, gratuitous moments and still tell the story somehow. Yeah. There's a scene in the basement where Amon Goth or Gotha, or whatever how you say his name, Ray Fiennes, who's famous as being Voldemort also. Like, it's interesting how my wife was saying he's got...
see it.
Oh, yeah. I was so immersed in it. And then my wife, he pulled her face and she's like, oh, he looks exactly like Voldemort now. But it's so... I mean, he just is one of the greatest actors of all time.
Ray Fiennes. Extraordinary. I'd say he was the best actor in this film.
He just... Yeah, I'm going aside, but there's a sequence... they're cutting between a Jewish couple getting married in the barracks of the camp, the Amon Gota's basement where this Jewish servant girl is standing there, like sopping wet in her like nightgown, and he's suggesting whether or not he should rape her or something. I don't know what. And there's a third sequence which I can't remember what they're cutting to. I think it's a big party upstairs that's happening, and all the Nazis were partying and getting all rowdy and all sorts of things. And it's really uncomfortable, because he stays with the basement sequence with Rafe finds Amon Gota, this bad Nazi officer, and this vulnerable Jewish girl who has been raped before. There's a lot of suggestion of rape, in this episode. And as you get sort of to that point where you're like, a lesser director would force you to witness the evilness of some of that act. Yeah. He cuts between all of the action of everything and forces you to experience moments of it. And it's not like he's pointed the camera away from gratuitous violence before. He's just shown it. And it's almost boring. People fall to the ground just bags of concrete and just go thud, then blood goes everywhere. It's almost like uninteresting and boring visually. And I'm not saying I'm bored by people dying. I'm just saying that, in contrast to perhaps a John Woo film or something where, it's like, like the body shaking. These what's happening to this girl or what's likely to happen to this girl. And all of this, and you can put it together, and he's drawn it out for long enough that the excruciating pain, he doesn't force you to now sit through it all. Yeah. Because he's like, okay, you get it that happened? Yeah, cool. All right, now let's move on to the next thing, because I'm not even there's things that happened for real in these camps that he didn't even put in the movies.
Yeah. And it seems, from what I think I listened in a podcast where they were saying Ammon was actually probably a darker character than what was portrayed, but Spielberg felt he took it far enough to go, all right, this is a bad guy.
Yeah, there's only so much that the person who can afford a movie ticket or is watching it on television, possibly in the safety of their own home, or in this day and age on an iPad or a phone or something, that I think that we're willing to accept about what is true about humanity. I mean, what is it with airplanes in this podcast?
Every time we do it.
Yeah. I mean, for instance, there's open slave markets still in parts of Africa.
Yeah,
that's beyond. I don't even know what that looks like. That's beyond our comprehension. For you to physically witness on camera, and especially knowing it's not a documentary, it's a feature film. I feel like to see all the evil of it, you'd eventually go, nah, he's exaggerating.
Yeah.
Because you just can't accept how evil some of this stuff was.
I think they did a good job of not othering the bad guys. Like you got a sense that this could be any of us, given the right sort of circumstance. I think will probably give away the time that we're filming this, but we've had a situation over the last few years where I've come to realize that a certain environment could arise in our culture where people can be ruthless and feel like they're justified in being mean, cruel, nasty, violent towards people.
Yeah.
And it happens around war as well. I feel like with media and with politics, they try and create an other. There are these people who are they're horrible, they're dirty.
Well, look at what happens if you. I'm willing. I think we should go into it. Like you're probably alluding slightly to COVID and all the lockdowns and treatment. But not only that, we just had in Australia. We had all these Muslim guys going out there. I'm not saying it's all Muslims, but they were a lot of they were chanting "Gas the Jews." Yeah. Because of the war with Israel. I mean, like. Every Jew, or just the Jews that are pointing guns at your family? Like you're just generically calling for the death of one that's previously, I mean, I thought we were raised, all the movies we watched, everything was like, no, we don't do that. We don't say that we want to kill people that, I mean, it's probably more socially acceptable to say, gas the serial killers or, specifically, but even that is against my faith and my worldview that we should chant for the death of anybody, but it is becoming seemingly more acceptable. And you said something with the movie. I found it really interesting, and I don't want to go too deep into COVID because it'll become because obviously there's no parallel. Like it's so far apart. It's just the same spirit that animated some of the governmental structures. I think that undermined these things. That we just realized that very quickly. There's two moments in the film that really like, oh, I've seen that. I've seen that exact thing. It's exactly comparable. Essential workers.
Yeah. That was triggering.
That was triggering a bit because essential workers in here, Australia, everyone was like, oh, you're an essential worker, you're not an essential worker. And it was interesting who was essential and who wasn't essential. And
there was this almost sense of pride of I'm an essential worker.
You're an essential worker.
Untouchable kind of thing.
Yeah. And it wasn't necessarily logical. And we can definitely get into that. I know there's people who've definitely suffered and all those sorts of things with that. I'm not going to be flippant about people suffering around that. But definitely the idea of an essential worker is a disgusting concept in my view. And I'll argue that till, cows come home. Yeah. And the second one was that there is a clerical error and the Ben Kingsley's character, the accountant, who is Ben Kingsley. I mean, he's not unsung. He's definitely sung. He's won an Oscar. He played Gandhi. He's such a good actor. Yeah. My wife didn't even know it was him. And I said, and that's Ben Kingsley. And she's like, what? Because sometimes these people just, become who they. And he gets thrown on a train to be disappeared. And he's obviously the guy who's essentially knowing all of the information that Schindler needs and that works with Schindler and is running the whole thing. And Schindler's just the figurehead, the guy who happens to not be Jewish.
He makes it legal.
He's a good schmoozer. Yeah. And so he needs this guy. And you just have these Nazi officers who are just like, I'm sorry, sir. This is what it says on the document. The document is
just doing what we're told.
It's more inconvenient to change the document, so no, And then he gets another guy, and then he has to sort of feign that there's a problem. You don't know how much of that's ever backed up, and they start to get the idea that maybe Schindler has some influence that would get them in trouble. So
he acts like he does. Like I never felt like I knew whether he actually had those connections high up or not.
Yeah, well, no, me either. It sort of had the sense that they were maybe fleeting, but that moment made me go, "Oh, yeah, I've seen that. I know those people," and that's the bigger warning. The Amon got to the evil characters. They definitely exist today somewhere. They aren't being given the power. At least here in Australia, than I'm sure in other countries it's much worse. But they're less of a threat, I think, than the people with at least in our privileged society, than the people with the document who just say, I'm sorry, but the document says X. My lunch break is in 10 minutes, so I won't be helping you. And you're like, yeah, but I can lose everything if you don't just quickly file this form. It's like, I don't care, sorry.
But even with Amon, I'm not necessarily sympathetic to him, but you get a sense there's been some trauma. Like he's not an attractive man. He's not fit. He's not confident, or the only way he gets power is by threatening people, and he does it in horrible ways. Whereas you can see he's kind of envious of Oscar because he's big, he's strong, he's confident. Whereas, Amon's just this.
He listens to him because Oscar at one point describes to him about Oscar, our mate Oscar, Mr. Schindler. It describes to him about what power really is, and it's about the ability to forgive. And then the next few sequences, you see that influencing his behavior until, I just like killing Jews.
That scene was extraordinary. I think a lot of the times where he's like talking to himself, it's like he's psychotic, having a conversation, his dual personality. He's trying to convince himself one way or the other, and
I was just checking my notes to see if we've covered everything.
That's right.
He really does look like that, doesn't he?
But I still think we could all be that character given the right circumstances, like with our upbringing, or if you go through enough circumstances of rejection and feeling like you're failing, you could turn into this type of monster.
I mean, some people might think, oh well, but hang on, that's a uniquely evil person. Like we have to make them even like in a a spiritual atheistic society wants to say, yeah, we're just made of dirt and there's nothing more to it. But also, Uday Hussein or whatever, I remember when they were killed, that they made them the embodiment of of evil. These weren't just people that went bad; they were demonic, and all these characters. You see it in movies as well; they portray them as demonic.
Yeah.
But exactly like you say, he's a real person. He's really brilliantly like written and performed.
Yeah.
If you have that perspective, there's two things. Immediately, yeah, I felt sorry for him at certain points. Not like, oh, pity poor you.
Yeah.
Kind of like you're in hell.
What happened to you?
What happened to you?
Yeah.
Because you're in this character's in hell.
Yeah.
And it doesn't end well for him. What an awful life. And then the outflowing, if you realize that this does go back to like COVID and things like that. When we're all separated, hopefully many people realize we actually are all connected, and the outflowing of this tragic figure of who ultimately became a conduit for evil into the world is that he's inflicting pain and suffering on others. And that is the story of, gosh, this is not going to be a family-friendly episode. That's the story of like pedophiles and serial killers. I mean, wasn't one of those serial killers, I can't remember who it was it Ted Bundy or something, where they had some virus as a baby and they just put him in a crib and they didn't touch him for no one touched him for 5 months from birth. And it's like undoable. Like you've just stuffed him up then. Like
trauma from a childhood.
And and if you then go into a household that doesn't like try actively to repair that and just sees him as a troublesome kid and labels, we love to label people, just everything and labels, then what you end up with is just this cascading, and then what has happened is it's pain and suffering and pain and suffering and pain and suffering. And that's all this character is. You can just see like somebody made him feel so inferior that as soon as this has also happened a bit recently, I mean, you can't help but show your hand with watching it, if talking about a movie like this, your perspectives in the world, because you either don't like the Jews and you've got to work hard to hide it and just talk about the cinematic, what was great about the movie, or you're sympathetic to the idea that we shouldn't hate anybody, and that also somewhat extends to the bad guys. How can we stop this? How do we make it not happen again?
Yeah.
I'm ranting a little bit. I've lost my train of thought. It might be the gin. But gosh, it was a powerful movie. And I've been to the Anne Frank house, and this was in Poland, not in Amsterdam. And I did a tour of a World War II tour of Amsterdam, and you get to this thing at the end. The guy took us on the walking tour, and it's all this smashed glass, and the artist had done it something about never forget, never again. And I don't remember exactly what it said because I'm pretty sure it was in Dutch. But it stayed with me. It's like, oh, we've got to make sure this never happens again. And then over COVID and recently with all around the world with this supposedly pro-Palestine but basically anti-Israel sentiment, and people unwilling to condemn evil acts. And interestingly, not even talking about, the media isn't interested in talking about when groups of people if we extend back to the movie Hotel Rwanda, Bill Clinton, when he left office famously, deeply regretted never sending the UN in to stop the Houthi and the Tutsi.
Okay. I haven't seen it.
So it's Africa. They just went in, they just slaughtered their neighbors.
Yeah.
It happens all the time. And it's super quick. It's like overnight, boom, start doing this. And I mean, it's super quick in one degree, but I suppose it slowly creeps in with this idea that you can other people,
I've been trying to think about what does it mean to say never again, because it's easy to say, oh, we're not to hate those people and don't try and kill them. But I think there's more to it. There's almost a culture that needs to brew and percolate over time that creates the hatred. Yeah. Because I think it's kind of elements of that are happening in the world at the moment. And we're not picking up on it and sort of addressing it.
I can't help but think that the idea of grace And looking at this movie, I'm not telling anybody who's suffered these horrific things what they need to do, but the idea of grace is so actually really offensive. I saw it was like a YouTube video of this person had, like, it's the second most prolific serial killer in American history, killed all these young women. They were largely sex workers and stuff, but so I'm not saying they're lesser than, but he'd engaged their services and then just killed them and just was kept going. So it was easier access to these people who were vulnerable.
Yeah.
And it was just person after person just saying how evil and disgusting he was. And then this old guy came up and he extended grace. And in the context of being surrounded by all these people who rightly, like, they're so justified to hate this guy's extension of like forgiveness and grace. I think he said it in the 80s or the late 70s, the video was from, was so offensive. Like, I'm not saying the people in the room were offended, but it was like, I see what you're doing is the right thing, but it's really offensive and it's really like upsetting because I want to see this guy cut into 1,000 pieces and sent to every corner of the earth.
Yeah.
But that doesn't fix the problem, and it's never fixed the problem. I mean, clearly throughout history, people have had problems with the Jews. And the origin of some of those problems, I don't know whether that's just ideological or if there's been actual practical, societal, lack of integration issues that have meant that the two societies, wherever they've lived, they haven't worked together, and it's just eventually over decades or hundreds of years brewed into things like the Holocaust.
Yeah.
You kind of have to have some sort of like open, like, forgiveness and grace towards one another to make sure these things just don't happen.
Because I think
to end it.
Yeah, we're naturally tribal, and I think it's almost like we survive better in these smaller groups, and then when you try and mix it all together, it doesn't seem to work.
Yeah, you're forced to. Oh gosh, it's just such a heavy podcast. You're forced to just.
Well, I don't know what the answer.
Our job isn't to find the answer because this movie, this is done exactly to this podcast. This is why this movie is so powerful. We have talked about the movie and then basically stayed on theme and subject the entire time and barely touched technical aspects of it, except for maybe, some directorial choices and some performances. And they were really all just because of how well those kept us on focus. Because sometimes these movies, you watch a movie and you're like, that was awesome. Oh, I love the explosions. Oh, did you see that cool camera angle or blah, 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 blah. Maybe you might not use those terms, but that's what you're thinking of. Yeah. Or that you love that superhero, the way they were designed, or when the cool, Black Sabbath track came in. Yep. They're all sort of separate to the story and the themes and what like a filmmaker probably wants you to take away. We've been stuck on that story and theme because it's so. I said it's the most consequential film I've ever seen, and I can assume of all time because I've not seen all movies. I can say anything, I guess. But I think that means it's of significance, right?
I think watching it again after our experience of COVID has, I guess, brought a new light to this. I think watching it potentially beforehand, you're kind of like, you would other.
You wouldn't think that government, they wouldn't assume that level of power of the individual again. Never saying that it got anywhere near what they did to this tragic situation, but the government overreach and their investments. That's what you're suggesting.
Yeah,
because it was the same triggering for me as well.
And I think being in the West, we can often think that we're more righteous and holy, the good guys.
Yeah,
which I don't think we always are. I think we're just as susceptible to.
I think we're always getting everything right with every war and every. Yeah. No, I'm being sarcastic.
Well, there's a quote, I don't know if you'll be able to remember it, Liam Neeson's character about war, how it's like people generally are good guys. They want, they maybe, want money or they're womanizers or something like that, but they're good people. It's just war. Brings out the bad in people.
He says that when I don't remember the quote, but when Ben Kingsley's character is saying how bad Amon Gota really is, and Liam Neeson's not getting it, and he says that, and then Ben Kingsley tells him about how he just randomly went around just shooting every second person in the group.
It's kind of like there's people in our culture that put in this environment would do those sorts of things, but that environment's not there yet. But if we got there,
Yeah.
like for example during COVID, there were some people that wanted to go around, enforcing the law
Yeah. And
on
it's
people and inflicting it, and they
enjoyed
doing it.
Yeah. And that's what that is why, look, we're getting, this is leading into political discussion, which is exactly what the film should do. As I can assume, this is what Steven Spielberg wants you to have, is at least a discussion. We're both on the same page about this. It'd be interesting to have this conversation with someone who's really on the opposite side of it, which would be fine. Look, that's fine.
Yeah.
By being able to have that conversation, you're living in my reality, which is that you should have those conversations and it should be free. So one day maybe we'll review Schindler's List with an ultra leftist, or an ultra right wing, someone who wants to, whatever it is, the extremes of the
either side
that want to imprison their enemies.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can't remember what I was saying before that. What was I saying before that?
We need to imprison our enemies.
Yeah, no, don't imprison our enemies. So, can I ask you a rewatchability, technical aspects? What did you take away from this movie?
It's interesting. Coming into it, I'm like, this wouldn't be a movie you'd watch again and again. But in a weird way, I enjoyed the story. Like, it was so fascinating. The themes I find so relevant now that it's something that I want to grapple with more. So I think I would watch it again at least another couple of times.
Yeah,
but it's not for everyone, I don't think.
No, I do believe that I'm of the persuasion, of the opinion that I think that you should try to watch this movie at least once. Just try to watch it. If you don't want to watch it, that's totally fine. Maybe watch The Pianist, but just something to not. If you've heard the word Holocaust and you've heard a little bit about World War II, and the most you've seen is maybe the Band of Brothers or Saving Private Ryan or something very American, not that Spielberg's American, but then I would highly recommend trying this movie or something to just get a real picture of what it means, because words and throwaway statements, especially when people throw around the word Nazi to describe Donald Trump, I don't think that's appropriate. I think it's disgustingly inappropriate when you watch these movies and you and now look, if he picks up a gun and starts killing or calls for the death of people, starts acting and doing what Nazi means something.
Yeah, you want the word to have.
Yeah, language is polluted by people throwing around like hyperbole and like this throw around use of the English language. It doesn't mean that what people are saying has greater impact. It actually does the opposite. The first person to call someone else a Nazi that wasn't a Nazi just for effect might have been like, but what really happens very quickly is everyone goes, a Nazi is just a thing you use, and to make someone shut down debate, and
you don't have to listen to them then.
Well, you immediately lose what they really were. So watch this movie, and then associate the word Nazi with Amon Goethe and all the people and the behaviors that they do, and then maybe watch The Pianist and then never watch them ever again. That's totally fine. But on your point, and that's just me like saying, I honestly think some movies you don't have to watch Back to the Future or Lord of the Rings. You don't have to like any of those things. But I do think in this world, in this day and age, it would be wise to expose yourself to this movie, and you're going to enjoy it. Parts of it, you're going to find some of it hard to watch, but gripping. I'll say honestly, I think it's really gripping. And also we didn't touch on how it's shot too much, but it's beautiful. It's handheld. It's really. I think I will rewatch this. Last thing I'll say in my little rant is, I try to rewatch The Passion of the Christ every around Easter time. Obviously, the Easter is when Jesus was crucified, and I find that movie the most perfect. So good. And brutal and excruciating. There's people who would never want to watch that movie ever again or expose themselves to anything like that. And there's large moments of that movie that are very hard to watch. But you need a reminder every now and then. And what better way to be reminded of things? That's what the power of art really is.
I think so.
Yeah, sometimes that's why you listen to that song that you listen to, or that you got walked down the aisle to, or something. Yeah, I remember that. Or you make that sandwich and you make that meal, or whatever it was that little thing you had in your first house together. And you go, I remember when we had this last.
Yeah.
We associate things, and they pull us into a space. And sometimes that's what this movie did.
But it's a film that it's not just depressing where you go into darkness and you finish the film in a dark place. I think it inspires you to think about, well, what would I do in those circumstances? Who do I want to be in this story? Do I want to be the Liam Neeson character?
A lesser movie would just entertain you, right? And this movie forces you to think those things.
And like, I think just the way it was shot, the acting, the story that's being told, the music, it just all works together to entertain to a certain extent, but to challenge you on some themes which I think are important.
Yeah.
Otherwise, as far as how gruesome it is, people watch some horrible stuff.
Yeah.
The Saw movies and some of the zombie TV series.
People. I think that it's funny because the violence in this is not particularly gruesome compared to what we know that they actually did. What reports of what they actually did. But Mel Gibson does it in his movies as well. He did it in Apocalypto. Is that the most painful thing for us in watching a movie is that the people become real people. Like at the beginning of Apocalypto, you spend some time with these characters that are like these villages or from rural part of South America. I can't remember exactly where it's set. It's been a while since I saw it. And then they get captured by the big city people who do human sacrifice. And so when they go to, eventually get this group of people, some of them get sacrificed, it feels more impactful because these people have become real people to you, real characters.
Yeah.
You've seen them interact. You've seen them do some other things. In this day and age, that's the story we should be trying to grab hold of, is that these are real people. You saw maybe a minute and 30 seconds of the old man with one arm. If that, I'd be interested to know how much screen time you had and how much time you heard him talking and how much exposure you had to his story, and just do the maths on it. So that when he is taken off to the side and mocked just because he's old and has one arm.
Yeah.
Plenty of people have one arm or have an injury or are old or whatever or infirm. And they do not deserve to be shot in the head and laughed at and have their last moments treated like like just a prop for entertainment.
Yeah.
They're real people, and that's why it hurts, because the characters are real, and it just really shows us how if you aren't touched by that, work on yourself. Okay, do some work, because you might be an asshole, and you might be capable of Amon Gottert type things.
And I think we've got the issue in our culture at the moment of what type of people do we value, and I think we have that issue of those people who are disabled or old. Aren't
inconvenient
to society, but there's so much richness. Like those that have to live a difficult life have such a valuable perspective to give those of us that may be healthy or not disabled and live just an average life. So
I heartily agree. I think there's a lot to be gleaned from this. It's a movie I think that will stay with me for a while. I think initially in a heavy way, I went to bed and I watched Modern Family in bed before I fell asleep because I was like, I can't do this.
Right, it finished at 12 o'clock for me, so I had to go
it finished at about 12 o'clock for me too.
Watching.
I'm not going straight to sleep. I still dreamt about Nazis running after me and stuff for a bit, but that's just how I process things. I think my wife took like an hour to fully fall asleep because it was so heavy. She watched like multiple episodes of Modern Family, then went and checked on our kids.
Is there something wrong with me that I fell straight asleep?
You might be an asshole, Nick. Maybe that should be our little grab as me going, well, you might be an asshole.
Yeah.
I probably shouldn't say asshole too much. It doesn't sound good rolling off the tongue into this microphone. It's kind of gross. I won't do it again. So I think let's give this movie a rating out of oh my gosh. Coats. I was going to say Red Coats as well. That's so dark. Can we find something? Well, we didn't talk about the the scene, and we'll give it a rating in a second, but very quickly, you wanted to touch on that scene where they were smashing up the ghettos at night
Oh
time and the
yeah,
music.
yeah. It's like this playful.
The guy's playing piano.
What is it? Like the slapstick type of
Yeah,
music going on in the background, and then there's a scene where it's back looking across the village, and there's like pops going, and
yeah.
the lights sort of flash, and it's weirdly comedic in a way, but you're like feeling this mixture of emotions of
It's the anti-action movie sequence, right?
yeah,
Because you would arguably more bullets are being fired and more violence is happening than is happening in the average action movie.
yeah,
You know, they famously like put like cannon fires and full explosions behind just one little pistol
yeah,
fire in movies, so that we all think who don't fire guns that it goes, but it really goes, you know, like, and
yeah,
it's really boring sounding.
yeah,
And yeah, you're right. It was odd. And then they had that moment where the piano guy's just sat down and he's just playing the piano and then the guy's chiming goes, is that Bach? Is that Bach? Yeah, Bach. No, Mozart, Mozart.
yeah. It's kind of it really portrays their casual attitude of they're just going about their business.
Yeah.
It's
You have to believe that there isn't that many people that have that level of a bloodlust, that it became like a game to them. And I'll get on my high horse about something else. We have one of the biggest, I think they make so much money, is like Call of Duty, Modern Warfare, and all those sorts of things. We have plenty of people, millions and millions of people who play these video games. I'm not saying that you're capable of becoming a Nazi or anything, but that's the same sort of you're othering someone for entertainment purposes so that you can fire guns and blood and violence, and you pay more money so that it can be more realistic and quicker.
yeah,
And you work in teams with your mates. I mean, how is that? There's a big difference between doing that and doing that in real life. But what's the cognitive difference between that happening throughout generations, and then all of a sudden, you know, a government that you voted for, and you go, oh, well, I agree with them. Oh, they said all the right things to me, and I'm 22, and I was pretty freaking dumb at 22, so I didn't know much. And they said that those people are our enemies. Come on, all my buddies over here, you know, like, let's go and shoot them.
yeah,
And they were told that, we forget the situation in Germany before that was hyperinflation. They were blamed for, and they were given the entire blame for World War One.
yeah.
So their societies were in complete collapse economically,
And
and they just had a scapegoat, the Jews.
It created this culture of hatred, like, and that's where that's such a complicated theme of you can easily point the finger and blame them for responding a particular way. But it's like the West have to take responsibility for the situation you created
Yeah,
on these people.
the guy who, get a little tiny history lesson. The guy who chaired what was called the League of Nations and eventually became the United Nations was President Woodrow Wilson at the end of World War One, and he shafted them with the entire blame and the entire bill, and basically gave Germany hyperinflation and blah blah blah. And I mean, it wasn't just him, but he was a big proponent of it. That dude was pro segregationism and like, I don't know if he's pro bringing back slavery. He was a massive racist,
Yeah.
like epic racist dude.
Yep.
Right? This, like, it's just interesting that certain people, you know, like, that just gets, I guess, this niche parts of society that know about that and talk about that he was a president. But on the other side of the island, all these millions of people have economic suffering, and then they go to the same thing that they've been blaming for years, the Jews, wrongly, obviously, condemning the whole, you should never do that. But like, they were, you know, it just seems, I'm not saying I have a cohesive thought there, but it just feels, it shows how messy it all is.
Yeah.
You know, that there'd be all these young men there that you could assume in good economic times with a different government that didn't want to blame the Jews, they probably just worked in the local sawmill. And
it's kind of like that end scene where Oscar is that the war's over and Germany's lost, and the German soldiers have been told they're to just basically slaughter the Jews, and Oscar says to them, all right, now's your time, we're all here, you can shoot them all, or you can go home and not be murderers and go back to your families. And it's like they all turn and go. Cause
yeah, and they were all like a generation of broken men at that point. In Arnold Schwarzenegger's autobiography, he briefly touches on how he was raised by his dad, who was a Nazi officer, and or in some form involved in the Nazi army, and it just hung over him for the rest of his life.
Yeah.
The fact that he was essentially a loser. He was deeply. You would assume these people would go back, and some percentage of them would reflect upon their actions, and if they weren't punished for them through the legal system, that they would be forced to carry the idea, the knowledge of the evil that they're capable of, or the lack of action, like what evil can happen around them. They're really cowards. And I mean, personally, for me, I can't judge.
Yeah.
I mean, I can say that act is really wrong, but I've been confronted with that. I don't know how much of a coward I am.
But there's a circumstance where, like, you see Oscar wrestling with, he's like, what am I to do? Because you either stick your head up and you get shot, or you get put in jail.
Yeah.
And it's like, worth it? How do I play this, I guess, kind of game at this time? And he did an extraordinary job of, giving this idea that he's for the Germans and that he hates the Jews, but behind the scenes, he's
you saw the slow move that way, didn't you? He was initially interested in money and initially interested in making sure he could make a name for himself.
But there's still moments of compassion, or like when he's hosing down the
Well, that's further down his journey. Early on, it reflects like that. Ben Kingsley's character says to him, I should need to legally inform you that I'm a Jew. And he goes, I don't care. I'm a German. What does it matter?
But I even sensed it near the start that he was spouting stuff which he felt like he should say, rather than what he believed. Like he's like, the way he was communicating with Kingsley, he's like, this is what as a German officer, this is what I should be saying, where I don't know, I just got this sense that he didn't actually believe it, but he was having that wrestle inside of him, and then the outworking of that we saw later on in the movie.
Yeah. Wow. I might need to watch an episode of Modern Family after talking about this movie.
Yeah.
It's such a good movie. So, but we should wrap it up.
Yeah. Rating.
It is a infinite red coats out of 5 red coats. I'll give it 5 red coats.
I'd say it's almost a perfect movie. The only scene I didn't really like was at the end when he broke down. I wasn't.
Oh, okay, yeah.
I wasn't convinced. Like it didn't seem to fit.
I guess the idea would be, and the response I would give is that there's been a facade that had to be up the entire time because there was a government that he was faking it for.
It was just kind of a weird time to break down, and then it kept going. Like it's like, I could have sold this for another 2 people. And then
I see what you mean.
Yeah.
I think I feel I think that's a really fair criticism.
Yeah.
No, I just feel like the subject matter, because I know it happened and because it's just such an intense experience, I just feel like I have no idea how I would respond or what I'd do or anything. And as long as it's performed beautifully and it it doesn't overstay its welcome and I'm engaged, and it is a truly entertaining movie, and that's a poor word to use, but throughout the entire film you are gripping and entertaining.
It's a long one, but
3 hours
warrants.
Yep, this is the best 3-hour movie.
You don't even think about the time. Apparently it was 6.5 hours or something.
Yeah,
they had to cut back.
Yeah, there's no way I'd watch that. That's ridiculous.
Well, I heard someone say they could have maybe made 2 parts.
Again, it would overstay it. You don't need more. Oh, yeah. Unless there's a whole character and a whole storyline they cut out. Like, this story doesn't need more.
No.
Or you can make a series, but I don't want to watch that series.
Yeah,
this was a bitter pill to swallow in terms of the content and what it sits with you. And we got to wrap this up because we've given it our rating. We could carry on for a long time.
5 out of 5.
5 out of 5, 100%. Now we covered all of our subjects because we were going to try and make this one a shorter one, and that didn't work at all. It's basically the same length.
I think it warranted a longer episode.
I think so too. Where's my notes here? Let me see here. Totally relevant. probably would rewatch it.
Yeah.
Major themes worth chatting about. We did that. I feel like we've covered everything. We've done a podcast.
We're professional. We didn't even look at our notes.
We didn't. Well, I glanced at them briefly. Did you notice? Okay, hopefully no one knows. I don't think that has been recording for most of my thing. I just remembered.
We forgot we were too caught up.
We were too engaged, so you got your close up and I didn't get mine.
Nice.
Thank you very much, everybody, for staying with us, hopefully this entire time. We hope that we have encouraged you to see this movie, Schindler's List. And if you've already seen it, we hope that the discussion was fun. You know?
And if you watched it a long time ago, I think it's worth rewatching again.
Yeah, I agree. So let us know in the comments what you think of the movie. Give us a little like and subscribe. Click it and make it
join
those rainbow colors.
7 subscribers.
Yeah, we really want to get to 1,000 subscribers.
We want to get to 10.
We want to get to 10. Let's go 10. So yeah, we'll see you next week. Thank you very much.
Okay.
See ya.